All right, why don't we get started? Morning, everyone. So really nice to be back doing this talk. I've done it a number of times and it's always one of my favorite talks to do. So this morning, I'm going to talk you through essentially what would be my guide to doing an anti-inflammatory dietary reset. This is one of the foundational programs that I use with many patients that I work with, and it's one of those programs that just can be really profound and so valuable for people. So I love sharing it kind of with a wider community beyond the people who I treat one-on-one with. So let me introduce myself for those of you that I don't know or who don't know me. So my name is Jennifer Lewin. I am a US trained and licensed acupuncturist and herbalist. I have a master's degree in both traditional Chinese medicine and in Japanese style acupuncture, and also in herbal medicine. I also practice what's called integrative manual therapy. That is a manual, hands-on manipulative technique. And then I've been a specialist in working with functional medicine and functional medicine programs, as well as nutrition and nutritional wellness programs. I've been a practicing therapist for about almost 25 years now. I've worked predominantly in Asia. I was almost 20 years in Hong Kong, and I've been about 3.5 years in Singapore. I've also worked a little bit in the US. And I do a lot of lectures and sometimes teaching. I love doing community outreach, the kind of thing that I'm going to do here today, and just, sharing information and knowledge with people about everything that I practice. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the goals for this talk, this webinar. One is to introduce people to the version that I work with, my version of an anti-inflammatory dietary reset. A little bit different than a detox. So when I think about detox, I think about trying to push the body into dumping toxins. This is a little bit different because a lot of people, when you push detox, don't have the capacity to process and eliminate that load of toxins that you might bring up. What this program does, and why I love it so much, and why I find that I get such great clinical results from doing something like this, is because it's really more of a reset. It helps upregulate and reset or start to normalize various systems in the body, things like your immune system and your detoxification system. So without pushing detox, we can support our detox systems through this process. It gives, it does a reset through the gut and the digestive system because we're taking away so many inflammatory foods. It does a reset through the hormonal system. So we get this really beautiful multifaceted reset with this program, which is why it's always my preference to do something like this, especially when I start working with someone or when I'm doing kind of community outreach. This is really the program that I think I see and people get the most beautiful, very visible, palpable clinical results from. Okay, so I want to introduce you to this program that I work with a lot. I want to share my experience. So again, I've been a clinician for over 20 years, so I have lots of experience in clinical pearls as far as guiding people through this type of a program. I should also mention there is a chat box. So I will definitely do a Q&A at the end, but to the extent that you have questions, and I'm sure they'll come up throughout the body of this talk, feel free to just jot your questions down in the chat. If it works from just a flow perspective, I'll absolutely answer them as I go, as I see them coming up. And otherwise, I'll definitely come back to them at the end, okay? So besides introducing you to this version, sharing my experience, I really want to also focus on and explaining the concepts of both what anti-inflammatory means and what nutrient density means as they relate to diet. So those are two big kind of tenets of this program. So we'll go into that. I'm going to talk a lot about how and why someone might customize this type of a reset program. I'm going to go through kind of the full version, and then I'll go through lots of different ways someone might choose to customize them. So we'll absolutely go into that. And then I want to introduce everyone to a functional medicine model. So this is kind of one of the main principles that when I'm seeing a patient or when I'm thinking about anyone's case, these are the main principles that I think about. So those are, I'm going to go through that and what is functional medicine, and talk a little bit about just what that means to think about a person or a client through a functional medicine lens or perspective. And we're not going to get so much into all the other things other than diet in this talk, but just so you're introduced to it. I think it's a really valuable model to think about when we're thinking about health and wellness. Okay, so why might someone want to do an anti-inflammatory dietary reset? And this should say, and why Jen loves this nutritional strategy so much. So the main reasons are, one, so someone can evaluate how what they eat and what they drink is contributing or plays into their own individual signs and symptoms. And those signs and symptoms are absolutely going to vary from person to person. This program is amazing at reducing inflammation. So no matter where that inflammation is, when we shift inflammatory foods out of our diet, because the gut plays such a massive role in just overall health and wellness, in regulation throughout the immune system, and in regulation just in general throughout the body, we get these really beautiful results. So we want to do an anti-inflammatory reset to reduce inflammation and to increase nutrient density. So nutrient density means we want to get the most amount of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, kind of healing compounds out of the foods we eat. So this program is very much, we're going to bring down the inflammatory based foods and we're going to bring up the nutrient dense foods. And when you do those things together, that's where you start to see a lot of just beautiful changes happen for people. Okay, so we want to do this program because it really helps do a reset, as well as to just kind of quiet the noise, to allow the gut and the digestive system, the detox system, the immune system, a reset through our blood sugar and our hormones. Everything just gets a little bit of a break when you do this type of system. And during that break, it's an opportunity for the body to start to go into a self-corrective mode and start to shift various parts throughout the body. So when we quiet the noise and we couple that with bringing up nutrient density, so we're getting more vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, healing compounds through the foods that we eat, you start to see these really beautiful shifts. The gut in particular, when we change food, and why diet is so incredibly impactful to overall health and wellness, is partly because about 70 to 80% of the immune system resides in the gut. So getting the foods we eat and getting our gut and digestion right goes a really long way, not just from a digestive health and wellness, but just a total body health and wellness. And especially in today's environment where we have things like COVID and just immune system onslaughts that we want to try and keep our body really strong against, eating well and eating non-inflammatory foods and eating high nutrient dense foods is such a great way to do that. And for a lot of people, what I find as they go into this program, and why I recommend for most people that you do it for 30 days, is because 30 days is enough for a lot of people to start to change habit. And that's a big deal. If you can get into a new habitual way of eating, you can bring some of those principles. Not everyone needs to keep all these potential inflammatory foods out long term, but a lot of people do so well with keeping certain foods out. So we also get to use this program as what I call a springboard, or we get a clean slate. So then when we do start reintroducing foods back in, we can start to have a feedback mechanism back, which this kind of goes into these last 3 points here on this slide. So the analogy I often use is, think about if your car has a dirty windshield. If you have a dirty windshield already and you get a little bit more dirt on that windshield, you might barely notice. It's like it doesn't move the needle enough for the body to have a reaction, or for the driver to have so much of a reaction. But what this reset does is it's like cleaning the windshield of your car, and now you have this beautiful clean windshield. And if you get a little bit of dirt on that windshield when it's clean and beautiful, you notice. So the other really important part of this, most of us have absolutely no idea if foods are negatively affecting us. Lots of people might say, oh, I don't have an issue with dairy, or I don't have an issue with gluten, or I don't think sugar affects me. But most of us have these very numbed reaction responses to food. So doing something like this and giving it enough time for the body to really reset. And again, for most people, I find that's around 30 days. So that's generally my recommendation for doing this program. You start to get these feedback mechanisms back, and it's an amazing process. It's like such a great gift to give yourself. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit just about what functional medicine is, and this functional medicine model that I work using. It's like one of the main lenses that I look through when I'm going through someone's case. So functional medicine model is really, it's root cause medicine, but using a systems-based approach. So it's looking for and identifying underlying root causes within multiple systems in the body. And it's going to be different things for different people, but we usually want to investigate all the systems. I want to know what's going on in gut and digestion. I want to know what's going on with the immune system. I want to know what's going on with the detox system. I want to know what's going on with the mitochondrial system. Can that person make units of energy? Is there an energy production issue? I want to know what's going on generally with hormones and neurotransmitters. So these are communication molecules. So the way the body, the brain communicates with the rest of the body. I want to know what's going on with the physical body, with the structural body. Are there issues with not getting enough blood flow, not getting enough lymphatic drainage? Are there issues with organs not working optimally? Is the liver not working optimally? And then I want to know about things like lifestyle practices. The focus of this talk today is really about diet and nutrition. So that's going to be the main lifestyle practice that we're going to talk about today. But generally, there's 4 main pillars or tenets that we really want to get right. Getting diet right can drive many of these other lifestyle practices to help set them on the right course as well. So I often like to start with diet. I mean, sleep is kind of neck and neck there, but we want to get diet and nutrition right, which we'll talk about today. We want to get sleep and sleep management right. We want to get exercise and movement right. And we want to get stress and stress management right. So this functional medicine model is finding what's not right for a given individual in all those different systems in the body. We use all sorts of objective lab tests and markers, and we put that together with signs and symptoms. And then I'm going to formulate a very individualized and targeted treatment plan for someone. And I'm going to go through a little bit later what are some of those objective lab tests that someone like myself, a practitioner like myself, would look at. But it's always going to be things like basic blood work, advanced stool panels, maybe genetic DNA profiles on someone to look at where their genetic sensitivities or inadequacies lie. I'm going to look at things like advanced hormone panels. I'm going to look at their micronutrient profiles. Are they deficient in various vitamins and minerals? I'm going to look at their toxic load. So it's all sorts of very objective data points. And then we're going to use things like diet, lifestyle, I use a lot with supplements and supplementation, with herbal medicine, because I'm an herbalist. And then I'm going to integrate in anything else that I feel like the person needs. So me personally, I might also do some manual therapy. I might do some dry needling. I might refer out for other types of integrative therapies, things like psychotherapy, or just, I mean, there's so many wonderful osteopathy. I mean, there's a lot of really wonderful therapies out there, but it's nice to have this overarching framework like functional medicine to be able to pull what's an issue for a certain individual. Okay, so this talk is on an anti-inflammatory dietary reset. And so I'm going to talk about inflammation. So inflammation is, that term gets thrown around a lot. It's a normal immune system response. So if I was to cut my arm would get red and inflamed and might have fluid accumulation, and all those things are a normal, healthy immune system response. When there's infection or irritation, or a toxin has gotten into or on my body, or there's tissue damage, we want inflammation. We want the body to bring in all sorts of immune cells and all sorts of inflammatory compounds to help with a healing process. Inflammation is not great, though, when it becomes chronic in nature, when it never goes away. And that inflammation, sometimes we can have it very locally. We can have it at one area. Let's say, again, if I had a bad cut on my arm, I might have just a local area of inflammation. We could have inflammation regionally. Someone might have inflammation through the entire digestive tract. That would be more a regional presentation. And a lot of people have systemic or total body inflammation, when there's a lot of different things going on in the body that might lead to an inflammatory response. So inflammation, it's an important thing. It's an important biochemical process to help quell, or, inflammation, you can think of it as it's like fiery inside, and we want to just quiet down that fire inside, because it's inherently part of almost any and every chronic medical condition. So no matter what medical condition one has, inflammation will be part of that. So by shifting inflammation throughout our gut and our dietary, the foods we bring in, we have a really profound impact on total body inflammation. So what are the things that contribute to inflammation? So modern day living, frankly, is full of things that contribute to inflammation. So poor suboptimal diet, that's again going to be the focus of this talk. Some people just have genetic susceptibilities. Some people, when I run their gene panels, are very pro-inflammatory. So those kind of people don't need a lot of interaction with potential inflammatory compounds in order for their body to mount quite a robust inflammatory response. Chronic underlying infections, so that might be something in the gut, that might be other just long-term infections. Many people have long-term issues with things like Epstein-Barr virus. Mycoplasma is a really big one that we see a lot in Asia as a chronic underlying infection. COVID, we're hearing this kind of long COVID, that would be a chronic underlying infection. So there's a lot of people have underlying gut infections that just go on and on and on for many years. Lyme disease is another big one. So that would all drive an inflammatory response in the body. Certainly gut imbalances, gut infections, so any sort of imbalances within the gut flora or the microbiome, parasites, yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, not having enough digestive enzymes, not breaking down your foods, not having enough hydrochloric acid, stomach acid. So there's a lot of different gut imbalances that are going to drive inflammation. And the big one we're going to focus on today is food and food-based inflammation. So food drives, so what we put in our mouth And what we eat drives a lot of inflammation and inflammatory processes within the gut. Food intolerances. So some people have frank, flat out food intolerances or food allergies, nutrient deficiencies. Toxic load is a huge one as a driver of inflammation. So like mold is rampant in Singapore, it was rampant in Hong Kong. So a lot of these like wet, moist, tropical humid climates, mold is a big issue. Heavy metals can be a huge issue. Environmental toxins. I mean, again, this is modern day living. So there's potential inflammatory compounds everywhere. Stress is a big inflammatory, like an inflammagen. So too much stress. External stressors like, issues with family, issues with finances, issues with job, issues with relationships, but also internal stresses. Blood sugar bouncing up and down throughout the day is a stressor. Infections, chronic underlying infections are stressors. Imbalances within the gut and the gut microbiome can be a stressor. And then other things like poor sleep, things like autoimmunity, things like the overuse of medication or drugs, those are all contributors to inflammation. Okay, so let's get into this program, the Anti-Inflammatory Dietary Reset program. And just to know, you will get a recording of this video and you will get a really nice handout that talks through very clearly what you need to, the suggestions for what to remove, what to eat in moderation, what's totally fine to have throughout this program. So don't feel like you need to write everything down because you will get that handout. Okay, so the basics of this anti-inflammatory program are to, as I said earlier, eliminate the most common inflammatory foods. Excuse me for a minute. And then eat a whole food, nutrient-dense diet. So that is predominantly plant-based. So most of what we're eating are all sorts of different colors and all sorts of different varieties of plant foods, vegetables, plants that grow in the ground, all like kind of your root veggies. And then we couple this with a paleo-based program, which is going to include good quality animal protein. So the reason why my recommendation is to add in animal protein is because it's incredibly nutrient dense. And one of the main foundational principles within this program, and part of why I think people get such beautiful clinical changes, is because again, we're down-regulating inflammation, up-regulating nutrient density. So good quality animal protein is important. But if someone has chosen to be vegetarian for whatever reason or vegan, you can absolutely do this program. And I will definitely be talking through how to do this and what my recommendations are if you want to do this either vegetarian or vegan. But for those people who are happy eating animal protein, or you've been thinking about potentially adding in some good quality animal protein, I would definitely recommend doing it in that way. And this webinar, I usually always get questions about, why animal protein. So this isn't really the forum to go into, whether to eat meat or not eat meat, but just to know, for someone like me, I would say, I don't think anyone should be eating conventionally raised animals. But for those of you who want to look a little bit further into it, there's some amazing information out there on what's called regenerative agriculture that really puts just a beautiful emphasis on how animals are raised, having animals eat what they're supposed to eat, having animals be part of this ecosystem that helps regenerate the soils and make our soils much more nutrient dense. So, you can certainly look into that or email me about that if you have questions. Okay, so again, we want to maximize nutrient density. Ideally, this is a 30-day program. For some really complex patients, I do find they need up to 45 days, but for the vast majority of people, 30 days is the right time frame. For those people, I'll talk also about if people want to do it for a shorter period of time, like 21 days or 14 days or even 10 days. I just don't think you get the same, clinical benefits as far as changing habit, getting this like reset throughout all these systems in the body. But Certainly there's nothing wrong with doing it shorter. If you just want to get your feet wet and try it out and start to get a sense of what foods might be triggers for you, that's totally fine to do it that way. So changing habit is a really big piece of this. Most people, the way we eat is just habitual. We're used to pulling for, products A, B, C, and D, and within about a month, you can start to get used to pulling for, E, F, G, and H. Just so much of how we eat is just habit and what we're used to. So this program is a lot about, it's an opportunity to create a new normal for yourself and how you eat. So we definitely want to optimize the quality of our food because we want to give the detox system a break. We ideally don't want foods full of herbicides, pesticides, steroids, hormones, antibiotics. As much organic, good quality food as possible during this month. And then it's really wonderful to use this program as a platform where you can then follow up with a very targeted food reintroduction program. So I think that's a great way to do it. Okay, quality of food I've touched on already. So ideally we want organic, non-GMO food. We don't want conventional pesticides or herbicides. We want meat and eggs to be grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised. Pasture-raised means, are the animals eating what those animals are supposed to be eating? So, by and large, cows are meant to eat grass. So we ideally want to avoid grain-fed beef. And same with chicken. Most chicken, even if they're organic, frankly, are fed soy and grain. Often it will say organic vegetarian feed. So it's really hard to find organic chicken, especially in Singapore. I think it's easier in the US from what I understand. Fish, ideally we want wild. There is some well-farmed fish, but you really have to get to know the farms, or your supplier needs to get to know the farms. So that's would be where fish are in clean water, where fish are eating what fish are supposed to be eating, or fish are not crowded, not given antibiotics. So generally farmed fish is to be avoided, but there are some good quality, well-farmed fish out there. So that is fine to have within this program. Ideally, we don't want preservative, additives, refined foods. If food costs are an issue, you can go online and look at what's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. And this is just to know which foods take on a ton of pesticide residue and which ones, don't take on as much. So, things with a thicker skin are often not so bad if you can't afford to buy everything organic. So the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen is a great way to help people prioritize which are the things that absolutely need to be bought organic and which ones are not. And then healthy fats, because toxins often accumulate in the fats of foods. It's an important one to also really think about organic. Avocados and coconuts are kind of the exception to that rule because both of them have quite thick skins. Okay, so let's get into kind of the meat of this reset. So foods to eat liberally during this reset. A large variety of vegetables. So about 2/3 of every plate you are eating, including breakfast ideally, should be vegetables. And so as much variety and as much color as possible. There are a few vegetables that are going to be taken out in this program when we get to the things to avoid page, like the nightshade family of vegetables. But by and large, cooked or raw vegetables. Some people, based on their gut, have a preference for slightly cooked vegetables, but for a lot of people, it just doesn't matter. It's really about as much color, as much variety, because each color gives us different compounds that are helpful in healing, different antioxidants, different flavonoids and polyphenols. So we want to maximize, again, that nutrient density by eating variety. it's really nice to put an emphasis on cruciferous vegetables because they really help drive a lot of, and help us break down toxins and even hormones in a really healthy way. So things like broccoli and cauliflower and bok choy and cabbage and kale and Brussels sprouts. So it's really nice to include those cruciferous vegetables. Ideally good quality animal protein. So if I'm saying about 2/3 of your plate is vegetables, you don't need a lot of animal protein at any meal, but we want regular animal protein. So usually I recommend just about the size of one's palm is a good guideline for how much animal protein should I eat at each meal. So that might be organic beef, organic or grass-fed lamb, good quality fish. Eggs are going to be in there if eggs work for people. Chicken and pork are a little bit tricky. So especially in a place like Singapore, depending on where you're living in the world, you can absolutely find pasture-raised chicken and pork. Singapore, not so easy. So on the handout I've given you, I kind of go through where to get if you're going to eat them, but I love to have people just take out chicken and pork during this reset month, if possible. Some people, the only animal protein they eat is chicken. So those people might keep it in, and then I give you a recommendation for where I think you should get your chicken. Eggs. So eggs are a little bit of a tricky one because a lot of people do have responses, negative responses to eggs. So I like to keep them in if they're pasture raised organic. So no other eggs during this month. So the Friends organic eggs, which you can easily buy on Redmart, they're in a lot of grocery stores. They're expensive, but I try and have people put things in perspective. So most people have no issues spending $20 or $30 on a glass of wine when they're out, but people have a hard time sometimes getting their head around spending, $10 or $12 on a carton of eggs. So again, I'll just say it's perspective, and to the extent that you can afford to buy organic pasture-raised eggs, for a lot of people, they're a good thing to keep in because they can be just a powerhouse of nutrients. But if you know they don't work for you, then you would take those out. They're also really great for breakfast. They're just like, they make a really easy breakfast food during this reset. Organic grass-fed bone broths are amazing to eat. They're incredibly gut healing. They have this beautiful amino acid profile. So it's the breakdown products of protein. So for people who don't want to eat the actual meat of protein, but are happy doing broths that are animal-based, bone broths are just amazing. I mean, they're full of collagen and all sorts of just other great amino acids that are very healing for the inner gut lining, for the hair, skin, and nails. A lot of the collagen-rich tissues are really great for. Also make a great breakfast. So I know like the Japanese a lot will eat bone broth for breakfast and put stuff in it. So you can add vegetables, So this is, again, goes back to kind of changing habit. Like we're used to eating maybe our cereals and our oatmeals and all that stuff's going to be out. A lot of people are, in my opinion, eating kind of dessert for breakfast. Too much carb, too much sugar. So we do know that protein-rich breakfasts are a nice way to balance blood sugar for the day, help with balancing around stress hormone. Again, you don't need a lot of animal protein, but some protein is really nice to have at breakfast. The bone broths that I like generally are the beef bone broths, the grass-fed beef bone broth, either at Scoop or at Sasha's Fine Foods that you can order online. Someone's asking me in the chat about a fish bone broth. I actually don't know a place other than making your own, getting kind of good quality fish and making your own fish broth. I do know on iHerb, the company Vital Proteins does make fish-based or marine collagen, peptides, and protein, and they might even have a fish-based bone broth powder. So I would look on iHerb for that, but I don't know anywhere to buy good quality fish bone broth in Singapore, but they probably, maybe Fishwives has it at Cluny Court. You could certainly check there. Organic organ meats, for those people who love organ meats, just again, making sure animals are good quality, kind of grass-fed organic animals if you're going to eat organic liver or kidneys or any organ meats, but they are an incredible powerhouse of nutrients. For people who don't want to eat the organ meats but want to get those nutrients in, there's some really nice organic grass-fed organ meat, either supplements, capsules or powders that are out there on the market. Other foods to eat liberally on the reset are going to be fermented foods, as much as someone can tolerate. Some people with more gut dysfunctions just don't do great initially with fermented foods, but to the extent that you feel okay digestively on fermented foods, they are amazing to eat. It's like the food-based probiotics. So things like sauerkraut, a lot of different traditional cultures will ferment vegetables. So fermented veggies are great. People can do water kefir or coconut kefir. Those would all be good things to do throughout this reset. Prebiotic rich foods. So prebiotics are the foods that break down to substrate that feed your good healthy bacteria. So adding these into your diet, these prebiotic foods can help kind of proliferate all the ranges of good healthy bacteria in your gut. So foods like artichoke. There's also a different food from actual artichoke. It's called Jerusalem artichoke, which is also a really nice prebiotic rich food. Things like asparagus, a lot of the foods in the allium family, so like garlic and shallot and onion and leek, those are all great. Unripe, so more green bananas can be really good. You can also buy green banana flour for baking. That's a nice resistant starch. Also helps feed good healthy bacteria. Beetroot, fennel, cabbage, jicama is lovely in salads or in wraps, radish, blueberry. So adding in these prebiotic rich foods are wonderful. So grains are out on this program. So the carbohydrates that one is going to be eating are going to be starchy plant carbohydrates. So things like sweet potatoes, yams, taro root, lotus root, parsnip, turnip, beetroot, root veggies, all of those starchy plants that grow in the ground. So those are your carbohydrates. And we'll talk a little bit later just about how you adjust your carbohydrates. So that's one of those things that, you know, oftentimes one would do with a practitioner, but I do have a slide it's going to talk about if you want to do kind of a lower carb version and why you might think about doing a lower carb version of this program. Lots of good healthy oils and fats. So we really want to take away all those inflammatory refined vegetable oils, but we want to consume things like organic extra virgin olive oil, organic coconut oil, cold pressed avocado oil, organic grass-fed ghee, unless you have just a major allergy to dairy. But ghee is generally butter fat that doesn't have the lactose in it, or doesn't have the dairy proteins in it. So a lot of people who don't do well with dairy can do ghee. And then organic MCT oil, which stands for medium chain triglycerides. That is kind of a purified version of what can be really healthy in coconut oil for people. So other good healthy fats. So oftentimes, most people eat too many carbohydrates. So we're gonna kind of reduce the carbohydrates, but you want to increase your fats for most people. So we can become what's called a flexible metabolizer. So for most people, they make all their units of energy from glucose, from what carbohydrates break down to. And again, this program is like an opportunity to balance a lot of things in the body. It's also an opportunity to reduce carbs and increase good healthy fats, so our bodies can start to learn how to make units of energy from fat. So we can make units of energy from two sources: carbs, which break down to glucose, and fats. And you know, we want to be like a hybrid car where we can kind of ideally move between these two worlds. Sometimes make units of energy from glucose and carbs, sometimes make units of energy from fats. So for most people, they're not eating enough of the good healthy fats and they're eating too much carbs. So again, an opportunity to balance. So bringing in things like avocado and fresh coconuts and coconut products. So coconut flakes, desiccated coconut, coconut cream, maybe coconut yogurt, things like organic olives, and then good quality in the non-inflammatory nuts and seeds. That's in the kind of foods to eat in moderation section. But those are also great, good, healthy fats. So we want to do organic herbs and spices, and pink Himalayan sea salt is a great way to get in minerals because it's just like chock full of minerals. And most people, especially in Singapore, because we sweat so much here, it's so hot and humid, we're losing a lot of minerals. So adding in a good quality pink Himalayan sea salt is a great way to just replenish some of those minerals. And then drinking lots of good quality filtered or mineral water. So I like this stuff, but there's lots of good quality mineral waters to drink. And we want to get ideally like 3 to 4 liters a day, especially in a place like Singapore. But many people in all climates around the world are dehydrated. So you want to keep up your fluid content. It's totally fine to do like herbal teas and stuff like that as well, but you don't want that necessarily replacing all your water. Okay, so foods to eat in moderation. So that's going to be your processed meats. So to the extent that people want to be eating things like gluten-free organic sausages, if you can find organic bacon without the nitrates, just a little bit, like once to twice a week. It's just really hard to find good quality stuff in the processed meats category in Singapore. Fruits, most people are overeating fruits. It's not that fruits are bad, but they will break down to a sugar, fructose. So this is an opportunity to balance blood sugar. So ideally 1 serving of fruit a day. Mostly I'm putting an emphasis for people on organic berries. They can be frozen or they can be fresh, just because they're full of, again, we're trying to maximize nutrient density. So they're not going to spike the blood sugar so much, and they have all sorts of kind of good chemicals and flavonoids and polyphenols and kind of important stuff that are really good and healthy for us for healing. Nuts and seeds are great. Certain ones are more inflammatory than others. So in this program, I have people do kind of a moderate amount, just a couple of handfuls a day of the less inflammatory nuts. These are the ones these are the non-lectin nuts. So lectins are what plants have evolved, the chemical kind of warfare that plants let out, so insects don't eat them. And they can be inflammatory for a lot of people. So these are the non-lectin nuts and seeds. So and then they should be organic, because again, toxins can accumulate in the fats of foods, and nuts are more of a fatty food. So foods like macadamia, hazelnut, walnut, pecan, pine nuts, almonds, but no skin. So I know in most Indians that I work with, in traditional Indian culture, most Indians will soak their almonds and take the skin off. So it's like traditionally that culture knew to take away the more inflammatory part of the nut. And so, but it's quite easy to buy blanched organic almond flour. That's on iHerb. Thegreengirl.sg has a really great blanched almond butter. So we can find products, blanched almond products, organic blanched almond products. Pistachios, sesame seeds, including tahini. Tahini is like such a great thing to use as dips and dressings and mixing with your olive oil and stuff. We're just making a tahini dip throughout this month. It's a great way to add flavor to your meals. Hemp seeds and flax seeds. So generally I'm taking out other nuts and seeds throughout this month. Vegetables that contain beans, things like green beans and snap peas, okay to have a little bit of, because all beans are out. Things, so we'll go through that in a minute, but the vegetable beans, okay to have in a little bit. The vinegars are okay, but I generally want apple cider vinegar. That kind of has the most medicinal and healing compounds. Most sweeteners are out for this month, even the more natural sweeteners. So I have people just do organic monk fruit extract or organic stevia. I personally don't love the taste of organic stevia, but the monk fruit extract really has a good taste. It's just you need a tiny, tiny bit for cooking with or for baking with. So you kind of got to get that, that amount right. But once you get the amount right, it's a really great natural sweetener, doesn't spike your blood sugar, and doesn't drive an inflammatory process in the body. Restaurant foods. So generally those are limited, but a lot because most restaurants cook with cheap inflammatory refined oils. So that's going to be things like canola, sunflower, safflower, peanut, rice bran, corn oil. So all of those we want out ideally during this month. Okay. What to eliminate during this program? Grains. So the glutinous grains, which are wheat, oat, rye, and barley, as well as the gluten-free grains for this month. So that's going to be things like rice and quinoa, buckwheat, millet, amaranth, corn. Those are all out for this month. Dairy. That's going to be cow dairy, sheep dairy, goat dairy. So, you know, all the normal dairy, the milk, the cheese, the yogurt, the butter, the cream. The yogurt replacement, the best one is going to be coconut yogurt, or some people, not so easy to find in Singapore, but in the certain places in the world, you can find some of the nut-based yogurts or nut-based cheeses. Legumes are out, so beans, so soybeans and chickpeas and lentils and pinto beans and peas and kidney beans. And peanuts. Peanuts are not a nut, they're a legume. So peanuts are out. And peanuts are also just really allergenic for so many people. So it's a good thing to keep out. The refined vegetable oils we already talked about when I spoke about the restaurant foods. These are incredibly inflammatory and probably one of the most important things to change long-term in one's diet, where you want to stop using canola, sunflower, safflower, rapeseed, peanut, corn oil, soybean oil, rice bran oil. Ideally, these should all be out, and we want to be using oils that not only are not inflammatory, but are health promoting. So people ask me all the time, oh, but I need to deep fry in canola. You don't need to deep fry in canola. So avocado oil is probably the best oil to do things like deep frying and just cooking in general, any high heat cooking. It's very stable at high heat, and it's a great, it's just a great natural oil and a good healthy fat. So that would be, coconut oil is also good, and ghee can be also good, but those will have a taste. Coconut oil tastes coconutty, and ghee is going to taste more buttery. So that works for certain foods, but not always for others. Nightshades. So, you know, sometimes I don't have everyone take out nightshades, but I find for the vast majority of people, they do benefit from having at least a month off of nightshades. So those are tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, so things like capsicum or chili peppers or paprika. White potato is a nightshade, and goji berry is a nightshade. I mean, there's other, a couple of other things are nightshades, but those are kind of the big ones that most people might eat. So it's great to take those out. Those are just full of lectins, especially the tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. A lot of people will react to those. And then sugars, again, this is an opportunity to balance blood sugar. So taking out certainly the processed refined white sugar, brown sugar. And then I also have people take out the natural replacements for this time. So things like honey, maple syrup, coconut sugar, agave. And again, most people can kind of reintroduce some of those quite easily during the reintroduction phase. But again, it's kind of an opportunity to let go of some of that. A lot of people kind of hold on to that taste for sweet, and it's like such a big comfort for so many people. So going back to kind of changing habit, it's just a great time and place to do that when you do this type of a reset. Chocolate I take out, even though really good quality organic dark chocolate has a lot of compounds in it that are really healthy. So that's, again, quite an easy one to get back in, but it can be an inflammatory trigger for some people. So I tend to have people take it out, and then you get to reintroduce it at the end of the reset. Caffeine, coffee, tea, energy drinks. So, if someone's going to do this whole program, but say, I can't do it unless I have 1 cup of coffee in the morning. Like, again, anyone who's doing this, you're doing this for you. But I would say most people use coffee more as a drug to give them energy when they don't have energy. And what you'll find during this program, for a lot of people, your energy comes back. So a lot of people don't need the coffee. With that being said, when you take coffee out of your diet, if you are a regular coffee drinker, you are going to have probably coffee withdrawal headaches. It's really common, but just know that it passes really quickly. 2 days to 5 days passes. And again, it's just an opportunity to take something out that a lot of people have a dependence on. And again, it's nice to see, a lot of people don't realize, because it takes so long for caffeine to get out of the system. It takes about 15 hours for all of it to be out of the system. That even if you don't think it's affecting your sleep, for a lot of people, it affects their sleep. So again, it's an opportunity during this time to just get kind of some of the foods out. And same with alcohol, cigarettes, recreational drugs. It's just a nice time to take those things out and give our liver a break, give our detox systems a break, give our gut a break. Okay, so things to note on the reset. It can be a little bit hard. The first couple of weeks can absolutely be more difficult. And then most people settle into a very nice new habitual way of eating. Just know you're going to have little mental freakouts. It's totally normal, very typical. It's really nice to do this with someone, with a friend or a practitioner or your family. It's nice to have a buddy, like someone you can talk to when you're having those moments of like, oh my God, I really want this food. And just know that, like, you'll have cravings, you'll have withdrawals, you might have headaches. You might feel a little bit of a slump initially, but just know that you will move through it. I think the people who really get the most profound benefits from this are just people who really do it in its entirety. And it's just, it's a really cool experience. If you've never done something like this, it's a great experience to go through. And it's one of those things that once you've done it once, it's very easy to go back to it. So for a lot of people, whether it's before the holidays or after the holidays, or, after a big vacation or after the summer, just to know that you can always go back and do an anti-inflammatory dietary reset and just get yourself back on track. So people really do feel better on multiple levels. So, definitely energy and fatigue, and everyone loses a bit of weight just because with inflammation comes fluid accumulation. So a lot of people are just losing like fluidy type weight, but a lot of people just frankly drop weight during this program. People feel better gut and digestively. I'd say kind of the first thing that people tend to feel better with, especially people note this in children and adults, is just better mental clarity. Focus, concentration, mental acuity, brain fog, which tells you, how much food has an effect on our brain and our mental cognitive abilities. It's, it's a little bit scary when you think about it in that respect. And I get asked a lot about, like, do I give out recipes? It's just not something, it's not really my area of expertise, and it's not what I love doing, but I generally give the guidelines, and then I certainly, there's some cookbooks I really love. And, if you have questions about those, you can certainly email me. But I think the best resource for recipes is Pinterest. If you go online to Pinterest and you put in keywords. So this is very much kind of a paleo-based diet. But if you use the keywords like paleo breakfast, paleo snacks, paleo lunch, paleo dinners, it'll scour the internet for paleo-based recipes. And then you start to go into the various websites, and then you're going to have to modify a little bit. You're going to have to maybe change the oils. You're going to have to change, take out the nightshades. There's going to be certain things, there's going to be things, it won't be perfect, but if you kind of know your parameters, it's a great way to find recipes. You can also just put into Pinterest, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, nightshade-free, like just the things that you're not eating. Keto is another, if you want to get into some of like, how do I incorporate more healthy fats into my diet? You don't have to be on a ketogenic diet to have some dishes that are more keto based. So I love Pinterest for recipes. I think, frankly, my helper goes onto Pinterest all the time. She wants to try something new and she just starts looking around Pinterest. So great for you to do, great to teach your helper how to do. Okay, so let's get into customizing. How might we customize this reset? Either to make it vegetarian or vegan, or pescatarian, or low carb, or shorter, or just maybe you don't feel like you can take all of this on. Maybe you want just a lighter version. Maybe you just want to get your feet wet. I'll go through that. Maybe you have an autoimmune disease. And then I would say there's a couple of additional things that I might take out. So we'll go through all of that. Okay, so vegetarian, what I would say, so I treat a ton of Indian vegetarians and just people who decide they want to be vegetarian and or vegan. And so for vegetarians, let me talk about vegetarians first. Eggs will become a larger part of animal protein because most vegetarians eat eggs still. And then potentially we're adding in a vegetarian-based protein powder. So maybe an organic pea protein or a seed protein powder. There's some good organic ones on Ayer, things like hemp seed, flax seeds I might be adding in. Pumpkin seeds and chia seeds I actually generally have out, and even pea on this program. But I think when we're trying to balance for vegetarians and vegans, I'm adding a few more foods in than I might otherwise take out for people who are eating a little bit more animal protein. I do find that almost all vegetarians really benefit from taking all legumes, all beans out. So vegetarians tend to be very heavy in grain and very heavy in beans, same with vegans. So having a break from those foods can be incredibly helpful. Again, I've just, over the many years I've worked in Asia, over 20 years, I've treated a lot of Indian vegetarians and they almost all just really feel good, just a month off of legumes. And then when they go back to them, they again start to get their feedback mechanisms back to see what's the right level for them. There's going to be maybe certain legumes that are just going to be easier for their system than others. You certainly, if you're soaking your legumes, that's very helpful. If you're soaking and pressure cooking, even better. And then vegans, generally I would keep legumes in, to the extent, again, that you can soak them and pressure cook them. You're going to help neutralize a lot of the lectins or the potential inflammatory compounds in legumes. You can do, I mean, on Dom D'Agostino's website, he has links to how to do kind of a keto version. If you did want to try something like that, you know, that could potentially be an option for someone. I'm going to do generally more nuts and seeds for the vegans than for non-vegans. And then again, adding in a protein powder, ideally a non-grain one. So not a rice one, but maybe a pea protein, organic pea protein, or an organic seed protein. And for both vegetarians and vegans, you know, some people are vegetarian just because they think it's a better way to eat for them. But some vegetarians are willing to maybe add in a little bit of bone broth or maybe a little bit of fish. And so again, to the extent that there's some flexibility for you, that's going to be kind of on a very individual basis. You know, I'm never here to tell somebody to eat animal protein if they don't want to eat animal protein. So, you know, you do what feels right for you there. But to the extent that there is some flexibility, or maybe even vegetarian or vegan and thinking about kind of opening that palate up a little bit to animal protein, this might be a good opportunity. And bone broth, frankly, is a really great way to start. Or there's some, again, kind of bone broth powders or collagen-based powders, either from fish or from chicken and turkey or from beef. So depending on what your preference is. For those people who are really complex and or have autoimmune conditions, sometimes I recommend that they do this a little bit longer than 30 days, but oftentimes 30 days is the right time frame for those people as well. But I would generally take out eggs and potentially all nuts and seeds for these patients. taking out these additional foods can really move the needle for autoimmune and or just really complex patients, like really serious fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, like, you know, have kind of a laundry list of signs and symptoms, not functioning so well in life, kind of that subset of people. Okay, so how might you adjust your carbohydrate intake? Ideally, you're doing this according to your blood sugar markers and genetic susceptibility. So that's going to be looking at things like fasting glucose, fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C at the very least. That's just basic blood work that any doctor can run. A lot of people do have genetic susceptibilities where they just do better on a lower carb diet. A really cool thing to do is to go to Guardian or Watson's in Singapore and buy what's called a CGM, or a continuous glucose monitor. It's a little, almost like a little plaster that you put on your arm, and it has a little needle, tiny little needle that goes into your body and monitors your glucose in real time over 2 weeks. And it syncs to an app, and ideally you're putting in what you're eating throughout the day, how you're sleeping, times of stress. So all those things can affect our glucose. So it doesn't tell us insulin, but it tells us glucose. So it's really nice to see. A lot of people will come back to me and tell me that, like, oh my God, I had no idea, like this certain food like really spikes my blood sugar. And, you know, a lot of time if something spikes you, then it drops you right back down. So that doesn't feel so good inside for most people when they get a really big spike and then, you know, quite a big drop. So ideally you want carbohydrates to bring you up slowly and bring you down slowly. So the carbohydrates that I recommend on this program, the carbohydrates like your sweet potatoes and your yam and your taro root and beetroot and parsnip and lotus root, they're really good and healthy for the gut. And, you know, a lot of them can act as substrate to feed your good, healthy bacteria, to help those proliferate. But they also tend to not bring you up, your blood sugar up so fast, and not drop you down so fast. So, you know, different people based on their own individual blood sugar profile are gonna adjust their carb intake accordingly. I think if weight loss is a really frank goal for someone, I would generally put them on a low carb, higher fat version. Know if you're gonna reduce your carbs, you have to increase your good healthy fats, or frankly, you just won't have enough substrate left to make units of energy and you'll be fatigued and not feel that great. So there's definitely nuance there, and working with a practitioner can be really helpful there, but you can certainly do this on your own as well. Okay. And then for some people, they may have heard of what's called a ketogenic diet, which is a very, very, very low carb diet. But more than that, it's like most of your macronutrients you're getting from fat. So it might be 70% fat, 20% protein, 10% carb. So it's a very extreme version of a high fat, low carb diet. Can be an amazing nutritional strategy for some, can be terrible for others. You know, I think women in general can do better when they move according to their cycle, if they're women who are still menstruating and have a cycle. And then just know that things like intermittent fasting or time restricted eating or ketogenic diet, they're just nutritional strategies. They may or may not be right for you. People can certainly try them. You can work with a practitioner. You can kind of play around a little bit. There's so much out there in like the podcast world as well, if you want to start to think about this. Okay, for those people who just want to get their feet wet, like I'm going through these lists and they're like, oh my God, I'm never going to do this. It's way too much. Nothing wrong with that. Totally fine to do a lighter version of this. Again, it's kind of like doing a shorter version of this. You're not going to reap the same benefits. But if the full version is not achievable for you, then start with a lighter version. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so the things that you want to eliminate on the lighter version, you still want to focus on nutrient density and whole foods and good quality foods, but you want to totally take out the glutinous grains. That's going to be wheat, oat, rye, barley, soy sauce, because there's wheat and soy sauce, and gluten-free oats. So I take out gluten-free oats because the protein in gluten that a lot of people react to is very similar to the protein sequence in oats. So there's a lot of cross reactivity there. So gluten-free oats are absolutely out during this time. All dairy, cow, sheep, and goat, all of the processed refined sugars, white sugar, brown sugar. So you might be keeping in, though, a little bit more of the natural sugars in this version. And you might also be keeping in a little bit of grain, maybe a little bit of rice, maybe a little bit of quinoa. Ideally, at least you're minimizing the grains, but if you're going to do a lighter version, gluten is by far, I'd say, the most inflammatory grain. So get that one out of at the very least, or the most inflammatory content that's a part of various grains. You want to take out certainly all your refined vegetable oils. That's such an easy switch over for most people and in most people's homes. Just get the canola, sunflower, safflower, all those refined vegetable oils, just get them out of your house. So you and your helper just have the right fats and oils that are healthy to cook and eat with. People who want to do a lighter version, who feel like they can't take out coffee 100%, switch it. It's got to be organic because it's such a moldy, pesticide crop, but just, maybe 1 shot of espresso in the morning or 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and that's it. Just give your brain about 30 to 60 minutes to wake up first. Let your brain wake up before you run to the coffee. And then taking out alcohol during this time. And then you can certainly play around with a low carb, high fat version of this if that feels right to you. Okay, so shorter version, again, if you feels like too much, you want to do it for 21 days or 14 days or 10 days, totally can do that. That's going to be just easier, frankly, and more achievable. But I would say sometimes you don't get out of the I don't feel so great part of this program to get to reap the benefits of I feel really great on this program. So that's kind of one thing to think about. So you don't get as complete of a reset. You don't get to go through this whole cycle. But you certainly can start to get a sense of how you feel by taking away inflammatory foods, which is really valuable. So the other things is I think you don't get to reap the same benefits within the context of resetting through the gut, resetting through the detox system, resetting through the immune system, resetting blood sugar, resetting hormones. So again, it's just not as complete. And we often, if we do it shorter, sometimes it's just not enough time to change habit. So, for me, one of the real huge benefits of doing this for 30 days is for most people, it's long enough to change habit. Sometimes for some people, it takes even a little bit longer. So, that's kind of for you to gauge yourself. If you're very happy after 30 days to do it for 45 days, go for it. So that's a really great way to do it until you feel like your new habitual way of eating. It's not like you have to keep everything out, but it's great to be able to know like, oh, these are my great carbohydrate alternatives. These are my great, processed refined sugar alternatives. There's all sorts of great grain-free flours to use. And these taste really good when I bake with them. I'm going to keep doing that. Changing your oils out, like all those things just can become habit. And then if we don't do it for as long, oftentimes you don't get the same information, the same feedback from your body when you reintroduce foods. Oftentimes it cannot be long enough. So just to note. So there's a question here just about how you would eat or do things like keto around your cycle. So Dr. Stephanie Estima, she's a chiro from Canada, has a lot of info on her podcast about that. She's a really great resource for that. She also has a book called The Betty Body. So you can certainly check her out. She's one of the best resources for that. Weight loss. So if weight loss for someone is a goal, then I would say you're going to customize your carb intake a little bit more. You're going to maybe look objectively at your blood sugar markers more and maybe your genetic susceptibilities. Again, wearing that continuous glucose monitor is great. Frankly, pretty much everyone loses weight when they do this month-long reset, this 30-day reset. And that's just because as inflammation goes down, we lose fluid. So most people then will drop weight. Some people drop a lot of weight. Some people drop a little bit of weight. A lot of the time that just depends on what else you have going on in your body. And that's where working with a functional medicine practitioner can be really helpful to just get a nice objective view as to what's going on in your individual body. Certainly, if weight loss is a goal, you want to check your thyroid and your thyroid markers and make sure that someone is not in a state of being hypothyroid. I am doing a whole talk on thyroid, I think on November 25th, so really soon. So if thyroid is an area that you suspect might be an issue for you, you might want to tune into that talk. And then sleep. I mean, frankly, sleep is maybe more important, or at least as important as diet when it comes to weight loss. You've got to get your sleep dialed in. So sleep, getting sleep dialed in, getting movement dialed in, getting stress management dialed in, all those kind of foundational tenets of kind of those lifestyle practices that'll really help drive health and wellness. It's important to get figured out from a weight loss perspective. Okay, so do I put people on supplements when I have them do a dietary reset? In general, I don't put people on a lot of supplements initially if I'm going to have them do this type of a program. Because frankly, I just want to see, I want them to see, and I want to see how they can feel just with changing diet alone. Now, if someone's already done a whole bunch of objective lab tests and I have all their blood work in front of me and I have a bunch of lab tests in front of me, I might put them on some supplements. And then it's just going to vary from person to person, but you know, it could be a foundational multivitamin, it could be magnesium, which almost everyone's deficient in, especially if their, you know, bowels are sluggish or they're constipated or if they're not sleeping so well. I might have them on something like vitamin D. If I see that their vitamin D levels are low, I might have them on some omega-3 fatty acids. I might have them just on a bone broth powder to get a little bit more protein in. I might have them on some liver support or some digestive support. So that's all going to vary based on the individual. As far as food reintroduction, so after the 30 days, I generally have people do a very slow and a very systematic reintroduction. If you're going to wipe your windshield clean, it's really nice. You have this feedback mechanism. So it's really nice to integrate one food at a time. So I tend to tell people, make a list of your top 3 foods that either you want to add in that are going to maybe make your life easier or make eating out easier, that you want to know if you're reactive to or not. So sometimes that might be rice. So rice is a big one people like to introduce. Sometimes that's something like chickpeas, because they want to have hummus, or they want to have some Middle Eastern foods, or they want to have some dals or curries or something. Sometimes that might be tomatoes. They want to see how they're reacting to a nightshade. So again, take the foods that you feel like you want to see how they're working for you, and you generally want to do one single food every 5 to 7 days. So this is a great stage to work with a practitioner, but you can certainly do it on your own as well. So that's kind of the reintroduction. And then just other things that I'm thinking about. So other than diet, when I'm doing a dietary reset with someone, they might not be feeling great, maybe because their detox organs are overwhelmed and they have a big detox load. So do they need some, you know, some extra support around their liver or their gut or their kidneys or their lymphatic system or their immune systems? And I would support that as needed. Again, I'm often going off of these very objective data points when I'm looking at this functional medicine model with patients that I'm working with. I don't tend to push detox a lot. So I usually don't want to give people compounds that push a bunch of toxins out into the bloodstream, because frankly, most people don't have the detox capability to deal with that load. What I find much more helpful for most people is to help support the body's own ability to do detox, supporting the various phases of liver detoxification, making sure they're having bowel movements daily, and getting the gut kind of back on track, making sure the immune system and the lymphatic system are well supported. Some of that might be through, I do a lot of lymphatic work with patients when I work with them using manual therapy. So all those things might be really helpful. Certainly we want to clean up the gut. That's incredibly important. So I do a lot of looking at objective, these advanced stool panels, and looking to someone have what's their bacterial microbial environment in their gut, the good healthy bacteria, are there overgrowths, are there parasites, is their intestines leaky or permeable? So things from inside of the gut are finding their way out into the bloodstream where they shouldn't be. I'm looking at things like nutrient deficiencies. Is someone, not have enough zinc or selenium or vitamin D or magnesium? So looking at what they might be deficient in and then supplementing either through adding in certain foods that can help or adding in supplements, supporting around whatever needs supporting. For a lot of people, it's hormones. A lot of people, I'd be testing the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, their thyroid, their adrenals, looking at a full hormone panel. A lot of people I'd be looking at, blood sugar more aggressively, or markers associated with brain health or respiratory health, or I'd be helping with blood flow. So I do a lot of hands-on work to normalize and help with blood flow, and just whatever else they need. Like for some people, they really, sleep is such a huge issue. We need to get that dialed in. For some people, they're just completely stressed out, and we need to support the adrenals and bring down inflammation and really help them with, I need to help them with stress management strategies. And then adding in whatever else might be helpful for some people. That might be acupuncture or body work or psychotherapy or dry needling. So just this very integrative approach. Here's a list again of just lab tests I might do. So I always start with basic blood work. I'm often doing an advanced stool panel on someone to see what's going on in the large intestine. If I suspect that they have a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, I might be doing a SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth breath test. There's a question here, a couple questions about SIBO actually. So looking at, can you do this type of reset alongside doing a low FODMAP, which is a nutritional strategy to use short term for someone who has small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? Absolutely. I mean, you limit, you're going to have much more limitations if you overlay this dietary reset with a low FODMAP, but I've done it many, many times. It absolutely can be done. And I'm oftentimes kind of making adjustments with the individual. So that's quite a nice thing to do with a practitioner. So you can get really kind of individualized advice for you. Sometimes I'm looking at food intolerance tests. I don't run these a lot, frankly, but some people really want to see them. The gold standard for knowing if you have a food intolerance, though, is to take it out for a period of time and reintroduce it. So that's always the strategy that I prefer to know if you have a food intolerance. And this program is like the perfect program for that. A urinary and organic acid test is a test that I use quite a lot, where we look at breakdown products in the urine to see how someone's detoxing, to look at some of their nutrient deficiencies, to look at how they're producing energy in the body, to look at some of the neurotransmitter levels, to look at if they have overgrowth of fungus or yeast or bacteria in the body. Really valuable test. I run the Dutch Complete Hormone Panel all the time to look at sex hormone and stress hormone and sleep hormone. And usually thyroid's looked at through blood, but that would kind of tie in with this hormone panel. Look at, does someone might have toxic load, so heavy metal panels, mold panels, environmental toxin panels. So this is all to see how toxic one might be, and then things like DNA analysis to know where someone's genetic susceptibilities might lie. So typical clinical changes I see on this program really are across the board. I mean, it's so profound how changing the diet can have such a widespread effect, which is why I just absolutely love doing this program with people, and why I think it's just such a great tool to have in your toolbox, to know that you can go back to this. You can do this. This is a great thing to do once a year or a couple of times a year after, the holidays, or after, a summer away that you've kind of drank too much and eaten a bunch of foods that don't work for you. It's a great tool to just know that you have available. Almost everyone gets optimization and gut function. I'd say almost everyone gets beautiful benefits in energy and sleep. Definitely in mental acuity, focus, concentration, memory, brain fog. I mean, that's probably what people notice first before they notice anything else. Usually within like 2 days to 2 weeks, people's brains just feel much clearer. So adults love that. And frankly, it's amazing for kids. I might not put kids on such a complete version. I might do a lighter version of this for kids, but you just see the most amazing changes in kind of brain and brain function. Especially getting the gluten out and the processed refined sugars out. Those are kind of two biggies for brain and brain function. More robust immune system, like everyone wants that right now, right? I get kind of emails, texts, patient questions all the time about how do I support my immune system to be as robust as it can be given what's going on in the world. So this is a great just either to do as a reset, but a lot of these principles become very easy to kind of follow through with in day-to-day life beyond this reset. Reduction and elimination in allergies and food intolerances, changes in behaviors, easy to see in children, but frankly, easy to see in adults. A lot of us are like flying off the handle all the time. So just this helps kind of give you much more resilience within your behavioral response system, which is really nice. Changes in learning disabilities and learning potential, again, both for kids and adults, changes in hormonal health. Sometimes for women in particular, you want to see what happens over the next couple of cycles. And what I tend to do, I think hormonally, most women do much better longer term on a low to no grain diet. So beyond just gluten, but taking out also other grains. So that's just anecdotally, I find that to be the case for most women. And then especially women as you're moving towards those menopausal years, as kind of those ovaries are shutting down, your adrenals eventually will take over making whatever sex hormone is going to be there in the menopausal years. And so taking the stress and stressors out of our lives and out of our diet is really, really, really helpful. Just to have more resilience and to move a little bit more gracefully into those years. I will do a talk at some point, I think in the new year, just on female hormonal health in general. It's just such a huge topic. And frankly, a lot of patients that I treat are kind of fall into this category of having various types of hormonal imbalances. Again, I'm doing a thyroid talk, which is kind of a piece of hormonal health at the end of November. And I think I'll do a more complete female hormonal health one in the new year. And then reduction and elimination in skin signs and symptoms. So if the skin is a detox organ, it's not an optimal detox organ, but if we can't push things through our normal routes of detox and elimination, we'll start to see skin rashes and skin symptoms. Sometimes it's hormonal, sometimes it's toxic load, sometimes it's gut. So you kind of got to get those things dialed in for skin. And then in summary, again, I think I've said this already. I think like this is an amazing thing to do at least once a year, just to kind of get a reset in. A lot of people like to do it more than once a year. I really feel like for most people, anyone can do anything for 30 days. So if now's not the right time for you to do it, like keep it on the back burner, do it when it feels right for you. And then 30 days is oftentimes enough time to change habit, which then allows us to bring some of these nutritional strategies more long-term and more forward with us into our general way of doing. And then I love to have people do this with a friend. I love to have people think about other lifestyle changes. So if you're going to do this, maybe thinking about getting sleep dialed in through the month, think about stress and stress management strategies for you, think about exercise and movement every day. And then, you get supported by a practitioner if you feel like that would be useful for you. I think for a lot of people, they really benefit in going through all these objective lab tests and then having someone read and interpret them and then individualize a program for them. And then these are my details. If you have questions or want to reach out to me after this talk, feel free to reach out on email. I practice at a clinical practice called Balanced Living. It's right near the 6th Avenue MRT. So it's really pretty centrally located. It's in this team. So yeah, feel free. I'm happy to answer questions. So I'm just going to go through a couple of questions that were in the chat box. Someone had asked if I could provide some flour alternatives. A really good question. So good flour alternatives where you're on this reset are, I love cassava flour, organic cassava flour you can get on IRB. That's really an essential. Organic coconut flour, if you are doing coconut, that is also can be really handy. Tapioca starch, tapioca flour is a good one to use that I feel like is kind of a must-have in your pantry when you're doing this type of a reset. And just to know, like for most baked stuff, it's quite nice. You usually want to mix a few flours. If you go onto Pinterest and start looking at recipes, in my house, we also use a lot of organic blanched almond flour. So that's a really good one for baking and cooking. So those are kind of my top flour alternatives. I will also say a really nice product to get on iHerb is their kelp noodles. There's also cassava pasta on iHerb. So those are great products to get when you're doing this type of a reset, because you can still have cassava, and the kelp noodles are kind of like glass noodles. So they're a really good noodle alternative. You know, and then people might be doing a lot more, like as a rice alternative, cauli rice is a great one. Some people are doing kind of vegetable-based noodles out of turnip or zucchini or different things like that can be really good and helpful to use throughout this month. I had another question here on good brands or products that I recommend for probiotics and multi. So we have a dispensary that's kind of associated with the clinic here that's within Balanced Living and the Living Cafe, the cafe that's also associated with the clinical practice. So I really love the designs for health products. They have a great foundational multivitamin, and I love their probiotics. Claire Labs also makes some nice probiotics that we use sometimes. Metagenics has some nice ones. A lot of the kind of high-end brands, what makes a supplement a good supplement is often kind of the form that kind of nutrient comes in, the other ingredients, so what kind of binders and fillers are in that supplement. And then most of the high-end supplement companies that work with clinicians or practitioners have independent third-party testing. So part of the problem with supplements is that the supplement industry is not regulated. So there's a lot of terrible quality supplements out there, and there are some really amazing quality supplements. So generally the brands that we have at the dispensary at Balanced Living, we have some really wonderful products, but I love Designs for Health. Thorn Research on iHerb is also a really good brand. So to the extent that you want to buy stuff on iHerb, that's a really good brand to go with. Probiotics, I usually recommend getting in Singapore just because a lot of them need to be refrigerated and stuff like that. So it can be a little bit trickier when you're sending stuff over. I mean, there are a couple of good things on iHerb. I generally recommend that people buy kind of the higher end quality supplements. Supplements, it's kind of, you know, it's a bit like wine. You kind of get what you pay for. So you want to generally get good quality supplements, but Thorn on iHerb is a really nice brand as well. All right, so I hope that answers everyone's questions. We're just getting to 10:30. So again, feel free if you have more individualized questions, absolutely feel free to email me. Great, so thank you so much. I'm going to end the webinar now, and everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks.